So super important video. I cannot stress this enough, guys, okay? We need to talk about safety protocols, right, and best practices for training inside of the home with inert weapons. This would also include dry fire, okay? And this would also include NLTAs, right, non-lethal training ammunition. But for now, we're gonna be primarily focusing on working with the CERT, working with the inert weapons. A lot of people get confused here and they think, well, why would I need to know safety protocols for an inert weapon? Okay, let me just kind of explain this to you a little bit. Inert weapons are exact replicas of actual live weapons, okay? And remember what I've said in other videos, that the autonomic nervous system doesn't know the difference between a simulated experience and a real one. So it's very easy to be complacent, to become complacent, especially when you're practicing a lot, and I hope that you do. It's very easy for a live weapon to unintentionally get into the mix, have some type of a negligent discharge, right, or an unintentional discharge. There are cases every year in the United States where people are killed training with inert weapons and training with NLT weapons. I'll tell you what, in many ways, training with these type of weapons can actually be more dangerous than training with a live weapon, because when we're training with a live weapon, we're not training in an environment where we're actually pointing weapons at one another or using weapons on one another, whether that be a firearm or a knife or whatever the case may be. So it's very, very important that we're strictly following these protocols. Trust me when I say, I have people who contact me on a regular basis who will say, gosh, I wish that I would have followed those protocols that you told me because I had a negligent discharge inside of my home. So let's do what responsible citizen defenders do, and let's follow these safety protocols to the T. A training space that is dedicated for this kind of training and this kind of training alone is absolutely critical. That's what that room, that's what that training space is dedicated for. Remember what I said, these training weapons that we're utilizing, these modern training aids, are exact replicas of real weapons, so it's easy for a live weapon to unintentionally fall into the mix. When you begin your training, it's important. This is what I do. When I'm beginning my practice, my regular daily practice or training, I say it out loud to myself. I say, I'm now beginning dry fire practice, or I'm now beginning practice with my inert weapon. That gives me an added reinforcement for me to remind myself, this is what I'm beginning to do. Then, at the end, when you've completed your training and practice, you want to say the words again out loud. I have now completed my dry fire practice, or I have now completed my inert training practice, or I have now completed my whatever practice that I'm doing. I want a mental reminder to myself, so I'm reinforcing that to myself. I'm making sure I'm saying that out loud. We're going to strongly recommend that you do the same. At this point, you are now completed with that practice. So you don't go back into that room. You are now done. You don't go back into that space and get another rep in real quick unless you repeat the entire process that we are about to cover. One of the really big and important rules here, just in general, especially if you're working with a CERT like this or some type of an inert, it could be just a blue gun or something like that, is that you're not walking around the house practicing drawing and shooting out light switches or lampshades or other targets around the house. Remember, again, these are exact replicas of live weapons. So you're creating habits, and it's easy for your unconscious to forget. Now you've created the habit of moving around your house and shooting out light switches, shooting out whatever around your house. This can very easily lead to a negligent discharge. We need to be very, very careful that we're not going to do any damage to our property, of course, but especially we don't want to harm ourselves or anybody else. Okay, listen, here's another very important safety rule. If anybody leaves that designated training area, they are to be immediately buddy checked by 2 people before re-entering the training area. If you're training alone, and you leave the training space in the middle of that practice session, start this entire process over again when you return. This is very important. You can't be too safe. If you're working with a partner, you'll get together with your partner and you'll practice a thorough buddy check. Maybe you'll even take your weapon off and hand it to your partner so they can check to make sure it's not a live weapon. Then they'll pat you down everywhere. They'll ask if you have any live weapons on, you'll ask them. Pat you down to make sure there's no live weapons, right? No live ammunition. I'm talking not anywhere in that space, not in a bag, not on a shelf, on a closet somewhere. There's no live ammunition, no live weapons, not your favorite knife in a drawer. There's no live weapons happening anywhere. If there's more than one person in that group, we strongly recommend doing a minimum of 2 buddy checks. 2 people, everyone gets patted down by at least 2 people. This is a very strict rule that we adhere to in all of our classes and all of our courses here at IDS. If you're by yourself, check yourself. Stop. Again, follow the same protocols that we've already talked about, but stop, check, pat down. It's easy to forget that you've got your favorite blade in your pocket, or you've got some ammo, or even a live weapon on you, whatever the case may be, right? So check yourself. We're like, okay, double check. All I have is my cert. My backup magazine is just a cert magazine. I don't have anything else on me. I'm patting myself down. All right, say it out loud. I'm good, I'm clear, I'm good to go, moving forward. If at any time someone perceives a situation to be a dangerous situation or observes an unsafe act, they are to shout ceasefire until everyone complies and points all weapons in the safest possible direction until the situation can be rectified. Let's also not forget what the hand sign is for ceasefire. If for whatever reason you're unable to speak, let everyone know in that training space that this sign means ceasefire, ceasefire. If there's any activity that you're participating in this course that you or your training partner feel uncomfortable participating in for any reason, don't do it. Skip it. Move on until you have a deeper understanding of the method or technique and you feel as though you can do it safely. Do not tolerate unsafe behavior by anyone. I'm talking about, not saying you shouldn't have fun, but I'm talking about horseplay that can be unsafe. Pointing weapons at each other, shooting each other when you shouldn't be. That isn't involved in a drill, right? Other types of horseplay that you might think might be fun, that might relieve some of the discomfort or stress of training in that particular way, don't do it. Follow these protocols to a T. Conduct yourself as a responsible citizen defender at all times. Next, be mindful and care for your injuries. Also, be mindful and care for the injuries of anyone else that you might be practicing and training with. One of the things that I like to do is I like to ask out loud before we start today, what's our injury report? If you have a regular training partner, this is what I always do. Or when we have a class, I always ask, what's the injury report today? Find out, all right? Make sure that people aren't doing things that they shouldn't be doing. We're in this for the long haul. Let's make it count. So when it comes to the combatives portion of these courses, we recommend that you're training at 30% amplitude. This will be physically sustainable, so you can do this over a longer period of time. This will also allow for greater retention and development of control and technique. You'll want to occasionally have intermittent splashes of higher intensity or pressure testing. Make sure that when you're doing that, you're doing so with control and respect for your training partner. Now, while we've chosen principles and techniques that offer the fastest and most effective application, competencies takes time, so be mindful of this if you decide to pressure test. Prevention of injuries is your responsibility, yours and yours alone. This being said, we recommend you keep an adequate trauma kit in your training space at all times that is dedicated specifically to that area. We strongly suggest you have a detailed medical plan in the case of an emergency. Be sure to brief any and all family members and training partners about the execution of this plan. Okay, so remember the 4 primary firearm safety rules, or what we at IDS call the range rules. Assume that all guns are always loaded. 2, never let the muzzle cover anything in which you're not willing to destroy. 3, keep your finger off the trigger until your sights are on target. And 4, always be sure of your target and what is beyond. Understand that IDS is classifying these 4 rules as range rules for a reason, because we understand that the words all, never, and always are absolutes, and we try to avoid absolutes at all costs, right? We try not to give any absolute statements or absolute answers to any contextual questions, because we understand that there are circumstances in reality that following those rules, right, may not be best for the circumstances that you're faced with. So there's a brief summary of the safety protocols that we recommend that you follow, right, when you're utilizing the inert and LTA training tools within this course. Be as strict as you possibly can in adherence to these protocols to help maximize that you and others are having the best possible training experience.